Hi, Harrison here, and today we're going to reflect on why you've never been broken. You simply never knew the truth. Nobody sat you down and said, "Hey, everything you were taught about being a good man, about being patient, about being strong, about being understanding, some of it was slowly turning you into someone who disappears." Nobody warned you that the habits you built to survive certain people would one day become the walls keeping you trapped. And here you are, still carrying weight that was never yours to carry. I'm going to be straight with you today the way a real friend would be. The kind of friend who looks you in the eye and says what nobody else has the courage to say. You are not struggling because you are weak. You are struggling because you were trained from a very young age to prioritize everyone else's comfort over your own truth. You learned to swallow your pain and call it strength. You learned to stay silent when something was wrong and call it patience. You learned to keep showing up for people who never showed up for you and call it loyalty. Marcus Aurelius had a different word for all of that. He called it blindness. Today that changes. I am going to walk you through 7 truths that are going to feel uncomfortable at first, because real freedom always does. These are not motivational quotes dressed up as wisdom. These are psychological realities backed by Stoic philosophy that will permanently shift the way you see yourself and the people around you. By the end, you will not be looking for validation from anyone. You will not be explaining yourself to people who were never listening. And you will finally understand why everything you thought was your fault never was. Stay with me. This one is going to change something inside you that needed changing for a long time. Let me ask you something, and I want you to really sit with this question. When was the last time you did something purely because you wanted to? Not because it would make someone else comfortable. Not because you were afraid of what would happen if you said no. Not because you were trying to keep the peace. When was the last time your own desire was enough of a reason? If you had to think about that for more than a few seconds, this lesson is for you. Here is what nobody tells a man when he is growing up. The world does not teach you to know yourself. It teaches you to perform. From the time you were a boy, you were handed a script. Be strong, but not too aggressive. Be sensitive, but not too emotional. Speak up, but do not make people uncomfortable. Succeed, but stay humble. Love people, but do not need too much in return. You followed every single rule. You were a good student, and somewhere in the middle of all that learning, you forgot to ask the most important question of all. Who am I when nobody is watching? Epictetus said it directly. First, say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. Most men never get to the first part. They skip straight to the doing because the doing keeps them busy, and busy feels safe. Busy means you never have to sit alone with the silence and face what is actually there. I know what that silence feels like. It is not peaceful. It is loud in the worst way. It is full of questions you have been postponing for years. Am I living the life I actually want? Am I the man I actually chose to be? Or am I just the version of myself that was easiest for everyone else to deal with? That second question is the one that cuts deep, because the honest answer for most men is the second one. You are not living your life. You are managing everyone else's experience of you. You became agreeable to avoid conflict. You became selfless to be loved. You became reliable to feel needed. And none of those things are bad on their own. The problem is that you did not choose them. They were chosen for you, slowly, quietly, through years of reward and punishment so subtle you never even noticed it happening. Think about it this way. When you spoke your mind as a boy and the room got uncomfortable, you learned something. When you showed emotion and someone told you to toughen up, you learned something. When you asked for what you needed and were made to feel like a burden, you learned something. You did not learn those lessons once. You learned them hundreds of times, in hundreds of small moments, until the learning became automatic. Until disappearing felt like maturity. Until shrinking felt like wisdom. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journal, words he never intended anyone else to read. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. But here is what that really means for you today. The cage you are living in was not built by the people who hurt you. It was built by the beliefs you formed in response to them, and beliefs, unlike people, can be changed. The man you were conditioned to be is not the man you actually are. That version of you was a survival strategy. It worked when you were young and had no other options. But you are not young anymore. You have options now. And the first option, the most important one, is this. You are allowed to stop performing. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to have needs, preferences, opinions, and edges that make certain people uncomfortable. That discomfort is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It is a sign that you are finally real. A caged bird does not fly because it forgot it had wings. The cage opens, and it just sits there because the cage became the only world it knew. Do not be that bird. The door is already open. The only thing keeping you inside is a habit that was never yours to begin with. Starting today, every time you catch yourself shrinking to fit someone else's comfort, I want you to pause. Not to fight it, not to force yourself to be someone you are not overnight. Just pause. Notice it. Name it. Say to yourself, this is conditioning, not truth. Because the moment you can see the cage, it loses its power over you. You were trained to disappear. But you were born to be here fully, loudly, and without apology. There is something I need you to hear, and I need you to hear it without your defenses up. That person you cannot stop thinking about, the one who treated you poorly, the one who drained you, confused you, made you feel like you were never quite enough. And yet somehow you still reach for your phone hoping their name is on the screen. That is not love holding on. That is your brain in withdrawal. I know that sounds clinical. I know it feels like I am reducing something deeply personal to chemistry. But stay with me, because understanding this one thing might be the most liberating shift you experience in this entire video. Your brain does not distinguish between a person and a substance when it comes to attachment. When someone gives you affection, attention, and validation inconsistently, the way a slot machine pays out just often enough to keep you pulling the lever, your brain releases dopamine, not because the relationship is good, but because the unpredictability is stimulating. The highs feel euphoric precisely because the lows were so painful, and your brain, trying to survive, codes that person as essential, as necessary, as someone you cannot function without. That is not a character flaw. That is neuroscience. Epictetus said, "Seek not that the things which happen should happen as you wish, but wish the things which happen to be as they are, and you will have a tranquil flow of life." What he was pointing to, centuries before we had brain scans and psychology textbooks, was this. The suffering does not come from the loss of the person. It comes from the resistance to reality, from the part of your mind that keeps replaying what was, hoping to change what is. Here's the truth that nobody says out loud. You do not miss him. You miss the version of him that existed in your best moments together. You miss the feeling of being seen, of mattering, of being chosen. And that feeling, that specific chemical cocktail your brain associates with that person, is what your nervous system is craving right now. Not the reality of who he actually was. The reality of who he was included the confusion, the inconsistency, the moments that made you feel small. You are not missing all of that. You are addicted to the relief that came in between. And just like any addiction, the withdrawal is real. The anxiety when they do not respond, the obsessive replaying of conversations, the irrational urge to reach out even when you know it will only make things worse, the way your body physically aches with it. That is not weakness. That is your nervous system going through exactly what it goes through when any powerful chemical is removed. So what do you do with that? The same thing you do with any withdrawal. You stop feeding it. You do not go cold turkey because you are strong. You go cold turkey because every time you check their profile, every time you reread old messages, every time you allow yourself to indulge the fantasy of what could have been, you are taking another hit. You are resetting the clock. You are choosing the addiction over your own recovery. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. The pain of missing someone, when you stop running from it and actually face it, becomes the very road that leads you back to yourself." because underneath the craving for that specific person is a deeper hunger, the hunger to feel whole, to feel enough, to feel at peace inside your own skin. And here is what I need you to understand. No other person was ever going to satisfy that hunger. Not that one, not the next one, not anyone. That wholeness is an inside job. It always was. The moment you stop outsourcing your sense of worth to someone else's behavior, the withdrawal begins to ease. Not immediately, not without discomfort, but it eases. And what replaces it is something far more valuable than any relationship built on inconsistency ever gave you. It is the quiet, unshakable knowledge that you are enough on your own, that your peace does not belong to anyone else, that you can feel the absence of someone and still be completely, solidly, powerfully whole. That is not coldness. That is freedom. And it is available to you right now, the moment you decide to stop pulling the lever. Let me say something that is going to go against everything you were told growing up. Your anger is not the problem. The way you were taught to handle it might be, but the anger itself is not. In fact, every time you felt that fire rise up inside you and then immediately swallowed it down, because you did not want to seem out of control, or aggressive, or difficult, you were not being mature. You were abandoning yourself at the exact moment you needed yourself the most. That is a hard thing to sit with. So sit with it anyway. Here is what anger actually is, stripped of all the shame and stigma that gets attached to it. Anger is information. It is your internal system firing a signal that says, something here is wrong. A boundary was crossed. A value was violated. Your dignity was not respected. Anger is not chaos. Anger is clarity, if you know how to read it. The problem is that most men were never taught to read it. They were taught to suppress it, to manage it, to apologize for it, to channel it into the gym or into work or into silence. And so the signal keeps firing, over and over with nowhere to go, until it either implodes into depression or explodes into something that genuinely causes damage. Neither of those outcomes is inevitable. Both of them are the result of a man who was never given permission to feel what he feels and then think clearly about what that feeling means. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." And I want you to understand what that actually means in practice. It does not mean suppress your reaction. It means elevate your response. There is a profound difference between those two things. Suppression buries the signal. Elevation reads the signal and acts with intention. Think about the last time something made you genuinely angry. Not irritated, not mildly annoyed, actually angry. Now ask yourself this: what did that anger tell you? Because if you trace it back honestly, past the heat of the moment, past the immediate target, you will find something true underneath it. Maybe it told you that you had been giving more than you were receiving for a very long time. Maybe it told you that you had been tolerating something that did not align with who you are. Maybe it told you that a part of you knew the situation was wrong long before your conscious mind was willing to admit it. Your anger knew before you did. It always does. Epictetus taught that we suffer not because of what happens to us, but because of the meaning we assign to what happens. And one of the most destructive meanings a man can assign to his own anger is that it makes him dangerous, unreasonable, or weak. The moment you label your anger as a defect, you stop listening to it. And when you stop listening to it, you stop learning from it. You become a man who is permanently confused about why he keeps ending up in the same situations, with the same kind of people, feeling the same kind of pain. The anger was trying to tell you. You just were not listening. Now, none of this means you act on every feeling. None of this is permission to use anger as a weapon or an excuse. That is the opposite of what the Stoics taught. What they taught was radical self-awareness. Know what you feel. Know why you feel it. And then choose your response with the full weight of that knowledge behind it. That is not aggression. That is mastery. Here is a practice I want you to carry with you. The next time you feel anger rising, before you suppress it and before you explode, pause for 30 seconds and ask yourself 3 questions. What just happened? What does this feeling tell me about what I value? And what is the most powerful response I can give, not the most reactive one? Those 3 questions turn anger from a liability into a compass. They take what was burning you alive and transform it into the most honest intelligence you have access to. Because your body does not lie to you. Your anger does not lie to you. It is only when you ignore it, shame it, or try to perform your way around it that it begins to work against you. You were not born with a defect. You were born with a signal. Learn to read it. Because that map, the one your anger has been drawing for years, leads directly to the man you were always supposed to become. I want you to do something right now. Think about your average day. You wake up, you check your phone before your feet even hit the floor. You move through a sequence of tasks, obligations, and responsibilities that fills every available hour, and by the time your head hits the pillow at night, you are exhausted. And somewhere underneath that exhaustion, if you are honest, there is a quiet but persistent feeling that you cannot quite name. Not sadness exactly. Not happiness either. Just a kind of numbness, a sense that you have been moving all day without actually going anywhere. If that hits close to home, what I am about to say is going to matter to you. Seneca wrote something almost 2,000 years ago that reads like it was written last week. It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a great deal of it. And then he said something even sharper. Omnia aliena sunt, tempus tantum nostrum. Everything is alien to us. Only time is truly ours. Read that again and let it land. Everything you think you own, your money, your status, your reputation, your possessions, none of it actually belongs to you in any permanent sense. The only thing that is genuinely, irrevocably yours is the time you are alive. And the question Seneca is asking you, the one that should keep you up at night, is this. What are you doing with it? Because here is what modern life has done to men. It has convinced you that productivity is the same as purpose, that a full calendar is the same as a full life, that exhaustion is a badge of honor and rest is a form of laziness. You have been sold the idea that the more you do, the more you are worth. And so you keep doing. More work, more goals, more hustle, more output. And the faster you run, the less you actually feel. That is not an accident. Busyness is anesthesia. And I say that not to judge you, but because I have lived it too. There is a version of constant motion that has nothing to do with ambition and everything to do with avoidance. When you are busy enough, you do not have to sit with the question of whether the life you are building is actually the life you want. When you are exhausted enough, the silence never gets loud enough to speak. And that silence, the one you keep outrunning, is where your real life is waiting. Marcus Aurelius, a man who ruled an empire and carried the weight of millions of lives on his shoulders, still made time every single morning to sit with his own thoughts. He did not call it weakness. He called it necessary, because he understood something that most men in the modern world have completely forgotten. You cannot govern the world around you if you cannot govern the world inside you. And you cannot govern anything inside you if you never stop moving long enough to look. Here is the confrontation I need you to face. If you removed your job title, your income, your social media presence, and your daily routine from the equation, who would you be? Not what would you do. Who would you be? Can you answer that? Because if the honest answer is that you do not know, then you have not been living your life. You have been performing it. And performance, no matter how polished, is not the same as presence. Presence is what happens when you are fully inside your own experience. When you eat a meal and actually taste it. When you have a conversation and actually listen. When you wake up and your first thought is not a task, but a feeling. Gratitude, curiosity, intention. Presence is what Seneca was pointing to when he said to reclaim your time. Not to do less for the sake of doing less, but to ensure that what you do is chosen, conscious, and genuinely yours. I want you to take one practical thing from this lesson. One thing. Find 20 minutes today, not to meditate if that is not your thing, not to journal if that feels forced, but simply to be somewhere without an agenda. No phone, no podcast, no input of any kind. Just you and whatever comes up. It will feel uncomfortable at first. That discomfort is important. It means the anesthesia is wearing off, and what comes through when it does, that is the voice of a man who has been waiting a long time to be heard. You do not have infinite time to become who you were meant to be. The clock is running. The only question is whether you are running with intention or just running. Tell me if this sounds familiar. Someone you care about goes quiet. Maybe they take longer than usual to respond to a message. Maybe they seem distant in a conversation. Maybe they cancel plans without much of an explanation. And before you even have a chance to think it through rationally, your mind has already built an entire courtroom inside your head, presented the evidence, delivered the verdict, and handed down the sentence. The conclusion? Something is wrong, and that something is you. That pattern, that immediate, automatic leap from someone else's silence to your own guilt, is one of the most exhausting ways a man can live. And most men who experience it have no idea it is happening, because it moves so fast and feels so true that it never gets questioned. Here is what is actually going on. Your brain, in its relentless effort to protect you, is doing something psychologists call mind reading. It is filling in the gaps of missing information with the worst available narrative. Not because that narrative is accurate, but because your nervous system would rather brace for a confirmed threat than remain uncertain about an ambiguous one. Uncertainty feels dangerous. A story, even a painful one, feels like control. Epictetus said, "Men are disturbed not by the things which happen, but by the opinions about the things." And what he was describing with precision that holds up across 2,000 years is exactly this mechanism. The silence did not hurt you. Your interpretation of the silence hurt you, and your interpretation was not based on facts, it was based on fear. Now I want you to think about where that fear comes from, because it does not appear from nowhere. Men who habitually read neutrality as rejection, who translate someone's bad day into personal failure, who feel a spike of anxiety every time there is a gap in communication. Those men almost always learned that pattern somewhere specific. In a home where love was conditional and unpredictable. In a relationship where someone's mood genuinely was a measure of your worth. In an environment where the silence before the storm was always followed by a storm. Your nervous system learned to read the quiet as a warning. And it has been doing that ever since, even when the quiet is just quiet. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." And the outside event he is pointing to, the one you need to stop giving power to, is the behavior of other people. Their silence, their distance, their mood, their response time, none of that is data about your value. It is data about their internal world, which you do not have access to and were never meant to control. Here is what I want you to practice. The next time someone goes quiet on you and you feel that familiar tightening in your chest, that pull toward over-explaining or over-apologizing or anxiously checking in, stop, take a breath, and then ask yourself one honest question. Do I have actual evidence that something is wrong, or am I writing a story? Because there is a profound difference between responding to reality and responding to a narrative your fear constructed. Reality can be addressed. A story you wrote about someone else's inner life cannot, because you made it up. And every time you act on that story, every time you shrink or apologize or chase reassurance based on something that only existed in your interpretation, you are training yourself to trust your anxiety more than your own clarity. The man who is grounded in himself does not need to decode every silence. He does not need constant confirmation that he is liked, valued, or approved of. Not because he does not care about people, but because his sense of self does not live inside someone else's behavior. He can sit with uncertainty without collapsing into it. He can notice someone's distance without immediately making it mean something about who he is. That groundedness does not come from not caring. It comes from knowing yourself so well, so completely, that another person's mood becomes interesting instead of threatening. You become curious instead of anxious. You ask instead of assume. You wait instead of spiral. Other people's silence is not your verdict. It never was. The only voice that gets to define you is the one that speaks when everything else goes quiet. Make sure that voice is yours. At some point in your life, without anyone explicitly saying it out loud, you learned that your presence needed to be justified. That taking up space required an apology. That having an opinion, a preference, a need, A boundary meant you owed someone an explanation, and so you became very good at earning your place in every room you walked into. You worked harder than necessary. You agreed more than you believed. You made yourself useful, entertaining, low maintenance, easy. You became whatever the situation seemed to require. And you called that being adaptable. What it actually was a man slowly handing over the deed to his own identity. I need you to hear this clearly. The need for approval is not a personality trait. It is a wound. And like every wound that goes untreated, it does not stay the same size. It grows. Here is how it grows. It starts small. You hold back an opinion in a meeting because you do not want to seem arrogant. Then you agree with something you fundamentally disagree with because the conflict feels too costly. Then you take on work that is not yours because saying no feels dangerous. Then you stay in situations that drain you because leaving feels selfish. And before long, you look at the life you are living and realize that almost none of the decisions in it were actually made by you. They were made by the version of you that was terrified of what would happen if you stopped being agreeable. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Do not waste the rest of your life in thoughts about other people when you do not act with reference to the common good." But I want to take that further than the Stoic political reading. What he is saying at the core is this: the hours you spend managing other people's perception of you are hours stolen from the project of actually becoming yourself. And that project, the real one, the one that matters, has a deadline. It ends when you do. Epictetus was even more direct. He said, "Seek not the good in external things. Seek it in yourself." And what that means for you practically today is that every time you contort yourself to fit someone else's expectations, you are looking for something in the wrong place. You are trying to feel whole by collecting other people's approval, as if enough of it stacked together will eventually add up to self-respect. It will not. It never does. Because approval from the outside does not fill the space inside. It just temporarily quiets the fear that the space is there. Here is the confrontation. Think about the last decision you made that was genuinely, completely your own, not influenced by what someone else would think, not shaped by the fear of disappointing anyone, not filtered through the question of how it would look. A decision that came purely from your own values, your own desires, your own assessment of what was right for you. How long ago was that? Because if you have to reach back further than you are comfortable with, that is the gap between the man you are performing and the man you actually are. And that gap, left unaddressed, becomes the source of a very specific kind of misery. The misery of a man who achieved everything the world told him to want and still wakes up feeling like something essential is missing. What is missing is him. The actual him, not the curated, approval-seeking, endlessly adaptable version. The one with edges, the one with non-negotiables, the one who can walk into a room without scanning it for signs of acceptance, the one who can be disagreed with without falling apart, the one who can be misunderstood and remain completely, solidly sure of who he is. That man does not require an audience. He does not need the room to validate his entrance. He does not perform confidence because he is not trying to convince anyone of anything. He simply is. And that simplicity, that quiet, immovable certainty about his own worth, is the most powerful thing a man can carry into any situation. Building that does not happen overnight, but it starts with one decision, repeated until it becomes a reflex. The decision to stop asking for permission, permission to speak, permission to disagree, permission to leave, permission to want what you want, permission to be fully and without apology the man you actually are. You were never required to earn your place here. You were born into it. And the moment you stop auditioning for a role in your own life, everything changes. The people worth keeping will still be there. The ones who leave when you stop shrinking were only ever comfortable with the performance anyway. Stop performing. Start existing. The difference will change everything. I want to talk about the one thing most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Not failure, not rejection, not even loneliness. Death. Specifically yours. And before you assume this is going to get dark or morbid, stay with me. Because what I'm about to share with you is not about fear. It is about the most clarifying, most liberating, most honest lens you will ever look at your life through. And the Stoics knew it 2,000 years ago. Marcus Aurelius did something every single morning that most modern men would consider strange. He meditated on his own death. Not obsessively, not morbidly, but deliberately, purposefully, as a daily practice he called memento mori. Remember that you will die. He was the most powerful man in the known world, ruler of the Roman Empire, commander of the greatest military force of his era. And every morning, before he made a single decision, he reminded himself that all of it was temporary, that he was temporary, not to feel small, but to feel clear. Because here is what the awareness of death actually does to a man who is willing to face it honestly. It burns away everything that does not matter. When you truly internalize the fact that your time here is finite, not abstractly, not as a concept you nod at and then forget, but as a living, breathing reality that shapes how you spend each hour, suddenly the things you were wasting your energy on become almost embarrassingly obvious. The approval you were chasing, the grudges you were carrying, the version of yourself you were performing for people who were not even paying attention. All of it looks different when you hold it against the backdrop of your own mortality. Seneca wrote, "Let us prepare our minds as if we had come to the very end of life. Let us postpone nothing." And what he meant was not be reckless. He meant be awake. Stop living as if you have unlimited time to become the man you were meant to be, to have the conversation you have been avoiding, to pursue the thing that actually lights you up, to let go of the relationship that is slowly killing your spirit. You do not have unlimited time. Nobody does. And the men who live as if they do are the ones who arrive at the end of their lives with a long list of things they meant to do and never did. Here is the question I want to leave burning inside you. If you knew with absolute certainty that you had 1 year left to live, what would you immediately stop doing? And what would you immediately start? Because whatever you just thought of in answer to those two questions, that is the most honest intelligence you have about your own life. That is your values, stripped of every excuse and every delay. And the devastating truth is this: you do not need a terminal diagnosis to live by those answers. You can choose them right now, today, in the next hour. Most men do not. Most men take the insight, feel it deeply for a moment, and then return to the familiar comfort of postponement. They tell themselves they will make the change when the timing is better, when the circumstances are different, when they feel more ready. But readiness is a myth. Nobody is ever ready for the life they were meant to live. They just decide to live it anyway. And the Stoics understood that the awareness of death was not a reason to despair. It was the single most powerful motivation available to a living man. Because a man who knows he is going to die stops wasting time on things that do not deserve it. The grudge you are holding is costing you time you will never get back. The situation you are tolerating because change feels uncomfortable is consuming days, weeks, months of a life that is not renewable. The version of yourself you have been postponing, the one who is honest, present, grounded, and free, is waiting on the other side of a decision you keep delaying. Marcus Aurelius wrote, in the most private pages of his journal, words meant only for himself. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. Not as a threat, as a gift. The gift of urgency, the gift of clarity, the gift of a man who finally stops living for someday and starts living for now. Finally, this is what all 7 lessons have been building toward. Not a set of strategies, not a collection of philosophical quotes to post on the internet. A fundamental shift in how you see yourself and the time you have. You were trained to disappear, but you were born to be here. You confused addiction for love, but you are capable of real freedom. You were told your anger was a defect, but it was always a map. You filled your life with noise and called it living, but presence was always available to you. You let other people's silence become your verdict, but your worth was never theirs to assign. You sought permission to exist, but you were never required to earn your place. And you avoided the thought of death, but it was always your greatest teacher. The clock is running. It has been running since the moment you were born. The question has never been whether your time will run out. It will. The question is what you will do with what remains. And that question, the most important one you will ever face, does not get answered someday. It gets answered right now, in the next decision you make, in the next moment you choose presence over performance, truth over comfort, freedom over approval. You already know who you are supposed to be. You have always known. Stop waiting for permission to become him. If this video resonated with you, write, "I'm grateful" in the comments to mark the beginning of your new phase. Subscribe to the channel, like and share this content with someone who needs to awaken from this cycle of pain and emotional dependence. And until next time.